Listen, just because you have these psychic powers and abilities, it doesn't mean you're any less of a human than anyone else. There are people who are fast, people who are book smart, and people with strong body odor.
It's rare that I talk about more modern topics on this channel because while I don't mind the media of today, there's just something that... I don't know.
Oh wow, a nerd likes me. Now I know what a fanny pack feels like.
Disgusts me.
We both die, I can torment you in hell.
I don't believe that modern media is all bad. There are gems here and there, but sometimes it's good to go back to a simpler time and just enjoy a story about trying to improve yourself and not trying to rely on your special talents. As someone who could easily be considered an average guy in America, I understand the idea of self-improvement, and it's something that I strive to do every day, and even more so after watching this show. There's something to be said when an anime can really touch your heart in a way that makes you want to improve yourself. And that's why I believe fiction can be a powerful asset in today's landscape. While I won't say that media can cause direct change, some media can subliminally inspire us to do better. And I believe that Mob Psycho 100 is one of those pieces of media. Hello, I'm Manga Kamen, and this is Mob Psycho 100, the anime that says fuck your psychic powers. Spoilers ahead. Go ahead and watch it. It's a good show. Well, that's honestly a good question. What even the fuck is Mob Psycho 100? It's a series that was also created by One, and if you're familiar with One and anime, you should be well aware of this. Hell, there's even a small cameo of One Punch Man in Mob, but Mob Psycho 100 started off as a web manga that was written and drawn by One, where we follow the endeavors of Shigeo Kageyama, aka Mob, a young student with amazing psychic abilities who's trying to find the simple joys of life. He works for his master, Reigen Arataka, a phony...
You guys are total frauds. Just try that thing with the black orbs again. Are these soap bubbles?
My black orbs. They swallow up and destroy anything they touch. And this man is swatting them away with his bare hands.
I mean, an eccentric psychic who runs his own agency that helps people with supernatural elements with table salt, massage techniques, and beating people up.
Oh, wait a second, now I remember. That's where it is. Get a job, you good-for-nothing bum!
There was also a ton of other characters in the story, and while I can't go through all of them since the cast is actually quite big, I say that is not a detriment, but rather, One actually manages to utilize all of the characters that are actually introduced and doesn't come off as overbearing.
Hold on, I know what you're thinking.
Those who have been on my channel for a long time know that I make a habit of stating this particular critique, especially for things like RWBY or Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
What's he talking about? I have got no idea. Okay.
Those shows' biggest detriments at times were that they had bloated casts.
That's obnoxious.
And would even get in the way of the characterization of pretty established characters or even the main character.
I'm sorry, but am I supposed to know you?
But Mob Psycho 100, in my opinion, doesn't do that at all. That's because One does this thing that a lot of writers don't seem to understand nowadays. One actually makes sure to remember who the main characters are of the series, but also shows that the side characters can actually get development as well, but that it also doesn't overshadow the main characters. Hell, I'd even say that it's done in tandem with the main characters as well. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The show has a lot of elements going for it, and even though it's been completed, the show does a really good job of entertaining the audience as well as instilling different emotions in them. I will legitimately say that this show made me cry because it managed to actually touch a few of my nerves, and in the next moment make me laugh out loud because of the characters' actions. So, much like the last time we covered an anime, I figured we'd talk about the 3 most powerful elements of Mob Psycho 100 that really connected to me and make me love this show. And apparently I'm not the only one, because a ton of other people have seen the show because this is a sleeper that a lot of people have missed. Because when I told one of my friends about this, they asked me what the show was about, and I said the following: psychics, ghosts, world domination, giant broccoli, and just general insanity. Yes, one of those things just doesn't belong here, but it does, apparently. It's because all of these elements, as well as likable characters, can make this into a piece of media that legitimately inspired me to do better as a person. So, what are these elements? It's the characters, the comedy, and the absurdity.
Misfortune? Bad things? I hear strange noises at night. Weird things keep popping up in pictures. Doors open and shut on their own. It becomes unbearable. Who knows? The spirit might have transferred to you guys by now. Be careful when you go to bed tonight. Let's go.
You really can't have a story without some sort of characters in it.
Well, duh.
I suppose it could be possible, but if you did, it'd be a real challenge.
Where is everybody?
Luckily, we've got a pretty interesting cast of characters in Mob Psycho 100. I already touched on Mob and Reagan, but they really are the heart and soul of the show. Mob, when he was a kid, tried to figure out his special powers, especially after an incident where he hurt people, including his younger brother. So he sought out a master who would help him, and he got...
Man, I'm bored. As it stands, I'm just a glorified masseuse. Time to throw in the towel.
Reagan. It's an interesting character dynamic, especially when we consider that Reagan doesn't have any actual psychic powers or supernatural abilities, at least at the start. He's a normal guy, albeit he's got a lot of personality, a silver tongue, and is often a major source of comedic relief.
What an unbelievable aura! This'll be my first big one in a long time!
It's right over here.
Hold up. Did you just point at the wrong building?
Meanwhile, Mob at the start of the series has a boring personality.
Right.
What's wrong? Are you not okay with that?
Oh, no. Just don't know why you called me to handle such a weak spirit. I mean, ones like that.
You just don't get it. When you reach my level, you get so crazy strong you end up melting everyone around you during a simple exorcism. That's why I ask you to take care of the weaker ones.
In a way, Mob and Reagan act as a familiar comedy concept, the straight and funny man. Respectively, of course. If you're not familiar with the concept, it's a basic comedy character trope, where you have an eccentric funny man be paired up with the usually deadpan straight man. The straight man is supposed to act as a foil for the funny character, and I can definitely see that being the case with Mob and Reagan. To be clear, Mob has very powerful psychic abilities, and is under the impression that Reagan has those powers as well. After all, Reagan has his own psychic agency. He must be a master psychic, right?
Relax and keep perfectly still. I'll lift the curse right now.
No, there's no need to go.
Your right shoulder is stiff. The curse really has a hold on you.
If you think I'm paying for this, you got another thing coming! What the? It actually feels pretty good!
Nope. Reagan tends to be over the top and will often do so as a guise to Mob and his customers. After all, he's not an actual psychic, but you know what he is? He's a liar and a con man, and a damn good one.
Listen up, you. This is all super shady.
Super shady, huh? I guess I can't blame you for feeling that way. I mean, all that stuff about nightmares and ghosts. What a stupid story. Just leave everything to me. If I exorcise the spirit, I'm sure Hanako's face will return to normal too.
There's nothing wrong with her face, you moron!
But these two complement each other as characters, especially when both of them help each other out. Mob not only inspires Reagan to the point where Reagan also goes to improve himself physically, but Mob obviously helps Reagan out with his psychic powers to deal with actual spirits and such. And while Reagan does only pay Mob 300 yen per day, Reagan does help Mob with his words.
Just because you have these psychic powers and abilities, it doesn't mean you're any less of a human than anyone else. There are people who are fast, people who are book smart, and people with strong body odor. Psychic powers are just like that, another characteristic. You must embrace that characteristic as a part of yourself and continue to live positively. After all, the truth behind one's charm is kindness. So just be a good person. You got it?
Even if Reagan's words are tinged with an aftertaste of a liar, there's still truth within them, and those words still manage to hold true to Mob throughout the series. Hell, Reagan tells Mob that he shouldn't use his powers on other people, and it's something that unless Mob is really at his breaking point, he keeps to his promise with Reagan. The two support each other and learn from each other, and that sort of relationship certainly does take the traditional master and student trope in a more entertaining direction. There's always the idea of the student will surpass the master, but we already reached that point since Mob is obviously much more powerful as a person with his psychic abilities. But Reagan acts as a master in a different way, being not a mentor of psychic powers, but being a mentor in how to be a good person. Mob keeps these lessons close to his heart. It's why when early in the series, when he's given an opportunity to join a club, he joins the Body Improvement Club. He doesn't want to rely on his powers as a person and wants to improve himself. And sure, he's not the most athletic person, but we do see him improve over the course of the series, because of the teachings that Reagan gave him. And Reagan does grow too. Yes, at the start of the series, while he does take advantage of Mob's naive nature, Reagan does genuinely care for the kid. As I said, he does take advantage of Mob's amazing powers and will often expect the kid to drop everything he has going on so he can help Reigen out. But this does reach a boiling point, with Reigen crossing a line and telling Mob that his newly acquired friends are just using him. Yes, I can feel the irony here. It crosses the line and Mob sees Reigen's attempts to manipulate him, and he distances himself from Reigen for some time. After a string of good luck with a mighty fall from grace, this does the one thing that you want to see characters go through: development. When put on the spot, Reigen comes to realize that he wasn't any better than the scumbags that wanted to use other people for their abilities, and that he was abusing Mob's powers and trust. After this whole thing, and when Mob saves Reigen from dealing with the extreme cancel culture,
strikes again!
Reigen comes to realize that he too needed to grow up, much like Mob did, and he does so by apologizing to Mob publicly on television. The two make amends, and eventually their relationship becomes a lot healthier, especially when Mob is training for a school marathon, and Reigen not only gives Mob a week off, but at times also helps Mob through his training to keep his spirits up. These two are obviously the main focus of the show and manga, and frankly speaking, their dynamic where they both grow and learn from each other makes their dynamic and characterization all the more interesting, especially when it also affects other characters too, because while there are a lot of side characters, they also get some development, and it doesn't overshadow Mob's or Reigen's. In fact, I'd argue that the side cast developments are done in tandem. Now, obviously I won't go into every single other character, since that would bog down this video to a degree that I'm sure my editor would probably want my blood afterwards. That and you guys should go to this show as blind as possible, and while I did give it a spoiler warning at the beginning, I still maintain that you should watch the show before going any further. But let's look at two characters to be specific: Hanazawa and Ritsu. Hanazawa is what you can consider to be the first real antagonist of the series, who does get a heel-face turn after his encounter with Mob. He's an Esper who's rather powerful in his own right, even having the ability to replicate the other abilities of other Espers just by watching them. And he was essentially what Mob would be if he didn't listen to Reigen's teachings. He abused his gift and was willing to use them on other people. You can even say that he was a counterpart to Mob because of this. And when the two fought each other, Mob refused to actually fight Hanazawa, with Hanazawa pushing Mob to the brink. Although, to be fair, if I had my hair lopped off like that and I looked like this, I'd probably want to kill the bastard who did that too. But regardless, when Mob pretty much reaches his breaking point, he humbles Hanazawa, and pointing out that the cocky Esper had an inferiority complex, because right after his fight with Mob, Hanazawa gets the same lesson that Reigen imparted into Mob, that just because he's an Esper, that doesn't mean he's a better person than anyone else, and he has to make an effort to be better. And then there's Ritsu, Mob's younger brother. Now, Ritsu was given the literal best hand when he was born. He's smart, he's handsome, he's popular, and he's got a position of the student council. He's basically everything that Mob wants as a student, and ironically, Ritsu has a bit of a complex about Mob as well. He wishes he had psychic powers like Mob does. This stems from Mob having a freak out with his powers on some bullies when he was younger, and Ritsu got hurt as well. Oh, and mentally scarred. So ever since then, while Ritsu put on a kind face for Mob, deep down he was envious and afraid of his brother. Logically speaking, the only way to fight an Esper is to be an Esper.
Now come at me and I'll face you head on! Self-defense rush! Another one of Reigen's special moves. When it's unclear if it's actually self-defense, he'll yell out self-defense just to be safe.
Again, logically speaking, Reigen breaks all the logic here, though. But when Ritsu does eventually gain his own psychic abilities and he lets his true feelings be known to Mob, we see the character drop his kind demeanor to his brother. It should also be noted that what awakened Ritsu's powers was the guilt of him doing things to falsely accuse students of crimes they didn't commit, which ruined their lives and reputations in the process. He used that guilt to power himself up, and with a spirit that goes by the name of Dimple leading him on, Ritsu tells Mob that he was putting up a facade to his brother. And what does Mob do? Mob just returns it by showing that he genuinely loves his brother, wanting to protect him, taking the blame for Ritsu's behavior and saying that he's at fault for his brother's feelings, since he didn't recognize that his brother was afraid of him. And Mob congratulates Ritsu for awakening his powers. He doesn't fight his brother, Mob just accepts his brother's feelings. There's a lot I could go through here with the characters, but I think the best way I can say is that the characters, they actually felt like people. When I watched the show and I saw that Mob was doing his best in making friends with other people, accepting Reigen's advice and seeing that he was becoming a better person, it made a huge bowl hole-cut scar on my stone-cold heart. This is a group of characters that can really touch your heart, and it's because they all in some form or another have development, or because they have meaningful connections with each other to some degree. Even characters who were antagonists slowly develop as well, and it's not done by the lazily power of friendship.
And that's why friendship is the best thing ever.
Yes, friendship is great. Must go get friends.
Brainwashing people is fun.
Nah, most of the time it's the power of nihilism, actually.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
At first I was confused. Now I'm totally lost.
It's so down to earth, and the characters feel so natural that I grew to love this cast. And there's a lot more to the characters that I haven't talked about.
I'm listening.
But if I did, we'd probably be here for hours on end. So let's move on, shall we?
Oops, you caught me being a mentor.
Much like the Mashle video, one of the best ways to really get me into a series is to be comedic. And considering that this is one we're talking about, someone who, while I won't say his art is terrible, obviously is not the greatest artist out there. Therefore, he has to really hook you in with the writing with his comedy. I can easily point to Reigen, someone who practically oozes comedic effect.
側面をまぶした拳でぶん殴るレーゲンの必殺技である。ねえ、全然大したことねえぞ。あら？
Which, as a con artist character, works well since he does a lot of the exuberant actions that lend credence to the comedy of the show. And I already talked about how Mob acts as a straight man of the duo at least most of the time. It goes hand in hand with Reigen's over-the-top nature.
That desk's kinda short.
It was cheap.
But since we already talked about that, let's get into another aspect. It's because one of the most effective ways to cause a comedic element to work is to have the element of surprise.
Really? What tipped you off, genius?
It's basically the subversion of expectations. I know that it's slowly becoming a dirty word in the online spaces, but let's face it, in a time where media has become a lot more accessible and people are chugging it down like a thirsty man trapped in a desert, we've all essentially become complacent with tropes and how they're played with. And sometimes when people don't really know how to work with the tropes and try to subvert them, they come out to be a bit of a mess. I'm sure you can think of at least one time where subverting an expectation wasn't done well. I know I can. Several of them. They tend to be most lucrative videos on my channel.
How long is this gonna go on?
But when it's played for comedy, it can really work, depending on the situation.
Listen up, you dirtbags! Draw another face on this dog and I will beat the living hell out of you!
He said all that after he hit us.
Let's talk about the first season where there was an evil organization called Claw. They were essentially a cult that was made out of espers with the one goal of taking over the world with psychic powers. And it's made up to be extremely dangerous. And while they do have their strengths, they're made completely inept because of, well...
Listen, real adults don't have time to play with toy swords. It's time to grow up!
Followed up with...
What's with that face? Don't look at me like that!
You and I, we're like brothers.
Wait, he's the same as me?
Now, if you're familiar with One's writing, especially being a fan of One Punch Man, this shouldn't be too surprising with you. One of the most common techniques that One does with his writing is that he'll often set up expectations of his characters which follow tropes and then subvert them. It's why when you see a character giving a heroic speech about how he has to fight the monster, and you normally expect them to be powered up by the cheers of the crowd and defeat it,
Justice Clash!
only gets smacked around by said monster. It's tinged in a bit of realism, cause yeah, if there was a giant monster like this, you'd definitely be able to fight this thing. What are you, crazy? The same can be said with Mob Psycho 100, where a lot of the comedy comes from the subversions of the characters and tropes that One is using.
Come with me.
I can't. I have to head home.
You'll be popular.
Okay, let's go then.
It also helps that when some of these scenes, they come with a distinct art style.
Now come at me and I'll face you head on! Self-defense rush! Another one of Reigen's special moves. When it's unclear if it's actually self-defense, he'll yell out self-defense just to be safe.
I talked about this a long time ago, but I called it the JoJo effect, where the scenes that we see are done in a much more distinct art style or coloring that they remain in your head longer and often be much more entertaining because you're not expecting it to happen.
What do you mean?
If you want another example outside of this, it was like that one time when I was reading the Bobobo manga, and all of a sudden Yugi Moto popped out of Bobobo's afro.
I summon Osiris, the Sky Dragon!
An amazing person has appeared! It's totally Yugi! Sadly, our author's artistic abilities haven't caught up!
Now Osiris, superconducting wave thunder force! Break through the darkness!
It seems like this can really be done well for actual comedic effect.
You think I look like some middle-aged pencil pusher now, don't you?
Since it really does come out of nowhere. I want to make it clear that this isn't the same as lol random humor because there's actually an internal logic here to be set up. Take the self-defense rush clip I showed just a few moments ago. The character that Reigen beats up is a blind man with extremely powerful psychic senses that allow him to focus on anyone who has psychic powers. But as I've explained, Reigen doesn't have any psychic abilities.
I think that's going a bit beyond self-defense.
The writing lays the groundwork for the joke in a line that most battle manga you wouldn't even blink at. Then when you see Reigen calmly walking up to the guy before unleashing a flurry of blows, it clicks in your head with the joke that you come to realize, oh yeah, he can't sense Reigen because he's a normal guy. There's also playing with the art style, which I already stated can be used to make the comedy and scenes more memorable. It's part of the creative mediums that animated or drawn content can use. And the thing is, I don't want to give too much away of the comedy. If I spoiled all the jokes, it would undermine everything I just talked about.
There is logic in what he says.
But yeah, I find it funny, and you guys should go check it out too.
And remember, supporting the official release, that's an excellent decision.
I realized throughout all this, I've pretty much pointed out that the absurdity of everything in the show is on full display. But that absurdity lends itself to the core message of the show. Throughout it, we're often shown that people will abuse the gifts they were given at birth. Those with psychic powers be able to get ahead in the world. Hanazawa being a prime example, and the ghostly spirit of Dimple being another character who's trying to become the god of the world, especially doing it through devious ways. There's nothing wrong with trying to get ahead in this world, but it's the egotism that accompanies the goals of people that makes it be known to be a bad. Remember how I started off this video?
Let's go. Listen, just because you have these psychic powers and abilities, it doesn't mean you're any less of a human than anyone else. There are people who are fast, people who are book smart, and people with strong body odor.
Just because you have a gift, that doesn't make you better than anyone else. Imagine how different Mob's life would be if he just used his powers to make things easier for himself. Sure, he'd be able to find some measure of success, but there would be repercussions. If he used his powers to be popular, people more than likely wouldn't like him as a person, but like him for his powers. If he used his powers to defeat anyone who hurt him, he'd be feared and resented. But what does Mob do in the story? He does what he can to improve himself without his psychic powers, and because of that, he's able to make legitimate friends and grow as a person. That isn't to say you can't use your talents at all. Hell, in order to save Reigen from the clutches of cancel culture, Mob uses his psychic powers to save his master. But just because you have your talents doesn't mean you should lord them over people or abuse them against others. We do live in a competitive world, and don't get me wrong, using your talents is necessary for your success in our world, especially nowadays when the world feels like it's stacked against you. But if you use your talents to hurt others rather than to help them, that just makes the world harder to live in. It's a message that I took from Mob Psycho 100 and the absurdity of the events and how in order to counter them, the best way was how Mob was able to use his powers, but they were supplemented by the mindset that he was given by the teachings that Reigen had. That you shouldn't use your powers against people, and that means a lot to me. You can use your talents, but you shouldn't use them intentionally to hurt someone. And even if someone does hurt you, you don't need to respond to them. It's a lesson I'm still personally trying to learn, but it's a message that I do want to take to heart, and I think everyone should as well. Seeing this high school student struggling to keep up with the Body Improvement Club, all the while learning from his con artist master and using his psychic powers to help people, it really made a lot of sense to me, and even though there were elements of pure absurdity, I love that stuff. And it was more mundane elements and how kindness from someone was able to help people through their hard times that really got to me. It's absurd, but it works. Still, I love the show and how it managed to have a good compilation of absurdity and grounded rhetoric that appealed to my goblin brain. So, if that sounds like something you'd like to see, I implore you to watch the anime or read the manga. It's fully complete now, so you can just binge it all if you like. I think it should be easy to see that I love this series. One that managed to create a cast that was goofy, fun, at the same time relatable, to the point where I'm sad I didn't get a chance to really follow this when it was coming out and became an internet sensation. Don't get me wrong, I certainly don't think all of modern media is bad nowadays, but there's a lot of baggage that does accompany it. And sure, there are some things about Mob Psycho 100 that do have issues that I wish weren't a part of the series, such as Crunchyroll's hand in how Mob's voice actor changed for the final season, at least for the English dub. But as I'm willing to separate the corporate BS from the actual material, I found this entire series was one I'm glad exists. It tells me that I can improve as a person. It tells me that just because there are people who are much more talented than me at things, that I shouldn't give up what I love doing just because they're better. And so long as I have people in my life who do care about me, I can always keep going on, and I hope you guys do too. Among a comment, and thanks for watching, my friends. Keep being awesome. Later.